Okay. So, Gabi, what happened happy is that we have Shabbos invitations for both meals this week from people in Century Village, who we don't know and we just met. So it was really nice. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. This week, we begin the book of Bamidbar, which means in the desert. Its English name is a little boring. It's called Numbers, which just sounds kind of boring. The reason it's called Numbers is because the book of Bamidbar opens up with a count, with a census of the Jewish people. However, Bamidbar in the desert is really a better description because it talks about life in the desert, in the Midbar, that the Jewish people are experiencing. And what we're going to talk about today primarily comes from Rebbetzin Shira Smiles, not from an in-person class this time, but still from one of her classes. But before we talk about that, I just want to talk about Yom Yerushalayim. Yom Yerushalayim, which begins Thursday night and on Friday. So it's on the 28th of Iyar. It's very nice, 28. The gematria of 28 is Chaf Chet, which is the word koach. The koach of Iyar is Yom Yerushalayim, and it's just so wonderful to be able to celebrate the reunification of Jerusalem. And I'm guessing that most of us were alive at that time since it happened in 1967. For me, it's always one of those, where were you when? Kind of like on the negative, where were you when Kennedy was assassinated? Where were you when the 6-Day War was concluded? I still remember we were living in California at the time, and I was walking to Hebrew school. And when we got there, I was like, the war is over. And it was just so shocking. And it was so, we have no concept, Gabi probably does. I don't know when she was there at that time, but, they were digging mass graves in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem. They were expecting a complete annihilation. Their stated campaign was to drive the Jews into the sea. So, Baruch Hashem, that did not happen, and it is a huge miracle. And it's challenging because for many of us going to Israel is something, except during COVID when we couldn't go for one reason or another. We take it for granted that we can go to the hotel. You can stop at Holy Bagel on the way and get a bagel with cream cheese and tuna and an iced coffee and take it down to the hotel. It's like, those things were off limits. I was listening to a class about Yom Yerushalayim, and the person who was speaking was saying that the yeshiva Shalavim, where our son and our family lived, that was the border with Jordan. That was a Jordanian border. The boys learned during the day and did guard duty at night. One of the colonels, Colonel Caspi, who was involved in that war, they found, after the war, they found plans to wipe out Shalavim. And they had diagrams of each of like the base medrash and the apartments and the caravans, and they had a very specific plan. So it's one thing when someone says, oh, they were going to wipe us out. It's another thing when you come across the plans to wipe you out specifically by your family and your address. So when people say, oh, we should go back to the 67 borders, they really don't even know what they are talking about. It is an insane statement to make. And for any of those who somehow have come under the sway of different people who think that the Palestinians had a nation beforehand at any point is absolutely wrong. It was under the control of Jordan. It was the Jordanians. If you look at who is in charge of the Temple Mount, sadly, it is Jordan. They were the ones. It was Jordanian troopers. There was never anything Palestinian. I don't know if you saw in the most recent thing, some Muslim cleric got on their national whatever and said that the Mossad was responsible 3,000 years ago for killing and assassinating their leaders from the Shias and the Sunnis, and were the ones who caused the problem using women prostitutes. But it was the Mossad. It's like, this is like,
what Mossad?
Right, exactly. So it would be funny if it wasn't so pathetic. So yeah. This is the time where we really have to focus on our gratitude for the fact that we have the land of Israel, that we have the state of Israel, that Jerusalem is what it is. And with all the challenges that there's such tremendous bracha and blessing, and the hakarat hatov, the gratitude and the recognition of what we have has to really be topmost in our minds and celebrated starting Thursday night of Yom Yerushalayim. So take the opportunity. They blame the Mossad for killing their Muslim leaders. There was a break. I don't know anything. We're not going to talk about it. The Sunnis and the Shias, whatever, whoever killed whoever, they're saying that the Jews did it and that it was the Mossad, which, as I said, is insane. So we're not discussing that, but just to show you how crazy it is. So anyway, celebrate Yom Yerushalayim. If your shul is doing something, please participate. Pray for Yerushalayim, Damas Yerushalayim, and express gratitude for we are the generation that has witnessed miracles. And the problem with witnessing miracles is we soon forget. And the miracle just becomes part of our ordinary backdrop. It's very hard to stay present and mindful of miracles, but that is our goal. One thing I wanted to mention, yes, Marcia.
Jordan got control of it in 48 or before?
Oh, no, Jordan had
48, wasn't it?
We're not going to talk about the
Temple Mount. Okay,
but
sorry.
Jordan was over. If you look at the expulsion of Jews from the old city, is under Jordan. It's Jordanian.
Right. Yes,
that's the Arab
kicked
country.
them out. Yes,
there's no Palestinian. There's no such thing. It's Jordanian.
Okay, but it was.
Ellyn, I was in Jerusalem. Yeah, I was in Jerusalem as a young person, a 20-year-old in 1965 with my grandmother.
Wow.
And yes, we had to do, we were way behind this barrier, and I could peek through in like a little hole. I was tall enough, obviously, but I could barely see into Jerusalem, and just like they said, the wall, it's way over there, we were far away.
Couldn't even see it. That's right. You couldn't even see it. You could look down at something that beneath it was the kotel, and that was it. Right. So we have a tremendous bracha. So we should just all remind ourselves that we are living in miraculous times, and sometimes we're like fish in water. I don't know if fish are aware of the water that they're in because they're in it. So we are, yes, Gabi. So that is the nature. So we'll do, I don't know Israeli history. I'm not the right person to ask, so we can talk about that with somebody else at another time. But yes, all my point is that there was no such thing as Palestinians. They were Arabs who were living in the land of Israel. They never had a nation. They never had a leader. They never had anything. They're just there. And not even so many of them, because they came when the Jews came, because we created the economic opportunities. All you have to do is look at Mark Twain and see what he wrote about the land of Israel. It was barren, malaria infested. Like, who wants it? Most people didn't, except everybody did. But going back to the land of Israel, something I forgot to mention, which you probably also heard during the coronation of King Charles, is that everybody looks to the Jewish people, who they're always constantly denying, for how we do things. And the Torah is looked to, and the Tanakh is looked to as the really only authentic version of what it means to be a king. And so when they coronate their kings, they anoint them just as King David and King Saul were anointed. And the oil that they used was from Har HaZeitim, from the Mount of Olives. So if you ask any of those British people, why do you care about the Mount of Olives? It's because it's from the land of Israel. And what's the land of Israel? Well, that's how the Jewish kings were anointed. So, when people get done with all of their mishigas and their misguided thinking and straighten out, it's just amazing. But he was anointed with oil from Har HaZeitim, from the Mount of Olives, because that's how you coronate a king. So it's really quite beautiful and bizarrely funny, impressive, exciting, frustrating, all at the same time. So that is Yom Yerushalayim. Take it in, but mostly the expression of gratitude is where we need to be. And the rest of the world, we can't worry about, honestly, we can't really worry about what everybody else is doing and thinking, but we need to be on the page of being extremely grateful for the great gift that we have. All right, Bamidbar, yes, it starts Thursday night and Friday is Yom Yerushalayim. Okay, the parsha, the book of Bamidbar, and we are in parsha Bamidbar, in the desert. And one of my favorite things to talk about, and I have to tell you, I'm probably the only person who is crying in services during the Torah reading when they discuss the formations of the Jewish people. People cry when Moshe dies, or the stand at Mount Sinai, or cross, leave Egypt, all these other things. And then there's me crying when they talk about the formations. So let's talk about the formations and see what we have to learn. What I'd like to do is share Smiles' insights that she's pulling from many different places to talk about it at 3 different levels. It'll be a bit, elevated, and these are images and visuals to think about. So sometimes we have to zoom out to get a picture so that we can zoom in and see what we're talking about, because the nitty-gritty is good, but the nitty-gritty without a context and a framework, we can get lost in it. So let's take a look. We are on page 733 if you have a Chumash. If you have a Tanakh, it is chapter 2, verse 1. Chapter 2, verse 1, the 4 formations. Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron, saying, the children of Israel shall encamp each man by his banner, according to the insignia of their father's household. At a distance surrounding the tent of meeting shall they camp. And then it goes on to say that the encampment is going to be all 12 tribes minus Levi. Levi is going to be immediately around the Mishkan. But the ones at the front will be under the banner of Yehuda on the east, and it gives the leader, and then the tribe of Issachar and Zevulun. We're going to go through the encampments and what they were and why they were like that. Now, here's a very interesting midrash. First of all, we want to pay attention to the fact that there were banners. That means that there was a banner, there was a flag for each of the tribes, had a flag. And the flag you have probably seen in Jewish art, either on the ark in a synagogue you belong to. If it has 12 panels, it's going to have 12 symbols. And the symbols come from the blessings that Jacob gave each of the tribes before he died. Okay, so those symbols are now on the design, and you can look it up, just Google symbols for the tribes of Israel, and you'll find them. So for example, any of you ladies who are Lion of Judah people, guess why you're called Lion of Judah? It's because that was the symbol for the tribe of Yehuda, was the lion, because in the blessing that is given to Yehuda, it says that he is a lion. So that's why all of them are based on the blessings that the tribes receive. So there was a flag and the banner and an insignia of their father's household. So there's an interesting midrash that says that Moshe was very concerned when Hashem told Moshe that the Jewish people are going to need to camp in a very specific formation. Now, I think we could probably all guess why that was Moshe thought that was going to be a problem. I don't know if you've ever planned a simcha where people sit and they're only sitting for a meal for a couple of hours. I'm not sitting next to her. I can't be in the same room with this person. I need to be near the door. I can't be near the speaker. I need to be in the restroom. I want my back to the kitchen. Everybody has an opinion about where they're going to be. Now, this was going to be how they marched and how they encamped, and it was going to be for the long term. Now, granted, at this point, they didn't know it was going to be for 40 years. But even any amount of time, you tell people you're going to be placed on the east. I don't want to be on the east. I want to be on the west. I don't do north. I don't do south. I want to be next to him, not next to her. So Moshe was like, all I see is trouble with this. Like, and why? We're going through the desert. Seriously, what difference does it make? You're in the desert, go find a comfortable place, set up your tent where you think you like it. And as they say in Yiddish, geg is into hate. Like, just go and be well and be there. You're telling me that everyone has to be in this squared off formation? What a weird formation for the desert anyway. There's nothing that's square. So why are we having a formation at all? And then why does it have to be so specific, and it has to be by each tribe, and this tribe has to be next to this tribe, and they all have to be together? And then they're going to go in this order when they march out, like, the Rockets, Yehuda leading the pack, and they're all going to go, and Don is going to be last. And how come I have to go last? If I go last this time, who's sitting in the front seat? In our family, growing up with our kids, we had a thing for who got to sit in the front seat. And it was based on even and odd days. of the calendar, which I only learned later was not so fair because whatever, 30, 31, whatever I did, I was like a bad parent and did it wrong. But anyway, it was like there had to be a system. So why does there have to be a system? This is just asking for trouble, right? There was no trouble. Why not? And what did God say to Moshe? According to Midrash, God says to Moshe, don't worry. They've been prepared for this. It's like, they have? What prepared them? Said, this is the way they carried Yaakov's coffin from Egypt to the land of Israel, was in this exact formation. They're used to it. It's like, used to it? I'm sorry, you know my history is not very good. There's a long time between Jacob passing away in Egypt and 210 years later when the Jewish people, I can't say I got used to something that I did yesterday. And you're telling me hundreds of years later, the Jewish people got used to it? And what difference does that make? What's the connection between 12 brothers carrying their father's coffin and 3 million people encamping in the same formation as they carried a coffin? Like, what is that? What does one thing have anything to do with the other? Okay, so that's what we're going to answer, is like, because those are really good questions that we probably haven't thought of. Why would God answer Moshe concern with like, don't worry about it, it'll be fine, because that's how they carried Yaakov. Okay, all right, so let's take a look at this. Right, ready for this journey? Let's answer this question and see what we learn about them, about ourselves, and about the Jewish people. So if we're going to go back and say that this has to do with Yaakov, let's find out why was there anything about Yaakov? Why was this encampment like this? Because it wasn't in birth order. This encampment is not in birth order. Now, I have to tell you again, like when we play games in our family, it was always youngest goes first. Just because the youngest is always getting the short end of the stick is usually losing the game, at least they should get to go first. So this isn't oldest first, this isn't youngest first, this is a different encampment that God decides how it's going to be. So, but he's saying, and this is what Jacob already set up back before he passed away. So now put your string here where we are in Bamidbar and turn back to page 285, and this is in Genesis. And where we are here is in verse 33 of chapter 49. So chapter 49 of Genesis, verse 33, you'll see that we're in parsha Vayechi, which is the final parsha of the book of Genesis, and it's right before Jacob dies. Verse 33, when Jacob finished instructing his sons, he drew his feet onto the bed, he expired and was gathered to his people, meaning he passed away. When Jacob finished instructing his sons, says, what were the instructions? The instructions were how to carry him from Egypt to the land of Israel, because he had already made Joseph swear that he would take him and bury him in the land of Israel. We see another reference to it on page 287, chapter 50, verse 12. It says, his sons did for him exactly as he had instructed them, followed by his sons carried him to the land of Canaan, and they buried him in the cave of the Machpelah field, etc., etc. It says, what did he instruct them on how to carry him? Why did Jacob care? Now, Jacob knows he has sons who have had issues, clearly. So you'd think that he would want to have like, okay, this is how dad wants it. This is how it's going to be. So you could say, even at this basic level, the more a parent specifies how something should be, the easier it is for the children. It was a huge bracha when Steve's mother passed away, or when his father passed away. Now I don't even remember. They were so close. They had laid out specific plans of exactly what they wanted, including how they wanted the limousine to drive home from the cemetery back to their house. That they wanted to go along the foothills because they love the mountains. And so nobody had any fights about anything. It was like, I think mom would have liked this. I think dad would have liked that. You know, he wanted me to be in charge. No, he wanted you to be in charge. He didn't want you in the car. You know, these things can deteriorate quite rapidly. So you could say, even on the most basic family level, that Yaakov would say, okay, boys, this is how I want you to stand. And you need to do exactly that, just so there won't be any issues. That's already enough of an insight that the more we specify to our family and friends how we want things, people always say, do you have a living will? Do you have like your final things of like how you want things to be? The more we can specify things for our loved ones, the better we make it for them. I've heard people say, oh, I'll let them decide. Like, do not let people decide. You make those decisions for how you want things to be, including for possessions. Including for possessions is indicate what you want, okay, to make your wishes known. So especially multiply that with 12 children, and you know you've got even more issues, especially when some children sold their brother. We're talking about some family dynamic issues that need to be addressed. So if we even stopped with that, we would already have a great Devar Torah just with that. But it goes way deeper than that. What was it that Yaakov was trying to do and to prepare his children for and to educate them? So Yaakov, we are called Beit Yaakov, the house of Jacob, with Bnei Yisrael, which was Jacob's other name. We are his descendants, and what was set into motion by him is something that is perpetuated into eternity. So we care a lot about what Yaakov did and why he did it. What was he trying to do? It says Yaakov is the one who basically representing the sphera that's called Tiferet, harmony and beauty. We're not called Beit Avraham, we're not called Beit Yitzchak, we're called Beit Yaakov, Bnei Yisrael. We represent what Jacob represented of his ability, symbolized really by Jacob's ladder, head in the head of the ladder in the heavens and the feet on the ground. The ability to bring heaven and earth together is what Jacob represents and what is the mission of the Jewish people. So the act of carrying Yaakov wasn't just simply, well, of course somebody has to carry him because he passed away. So it's just a logistics thing. This was about how do we carry Yaakov? How do we carry the mission of the Jewish people forward out of Egypt into the land of Israel and beyond? How do we function as a society? We function in this, that's what Yaakov was trying to tell them. That was his instruction to them. We want to have you formed in a way that represents how do you bring heaven down to earth? You know, in churches, they say, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Well, that's Jewish. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim, our Father who art in heaven. Our goal is to manifest God's reality in this world. How do we do it? We learn how to carry Yaakov. According to the Zohar and the Midrash, says that God's Kisei HaKavod, God's throne of glory that he sits on. Now we're going to be talking about images, so you have to kind of open our minds to the anthropomorphosis here and understand. We're talking about an image that God sits on a throne. And on that throne, it says that there are four sides. And on those sides, there are representations of four things. There is an ox, there is a lion, there is an eagle, and there is a human face. The human face is the face of Yaakov. It says Jacob's face is on the throne of glory, which means that according to like God's view of things, Jacob is front and center and represents bringing down God's reality into, like when you say you sit on a throne, when you sit down, that by definition means a lowering. You're not standing up. It doesn't say that God is standing on these people or these things. He's sitting, coming down into this world, and this is how it's considered to be structured. The ox, the eagle, the lion, and Jacob. So Yaakov is telling his sons, I, Yaakov, and now you, my children, are the ones who are going to be carrying the manifestation of God's presence in this world forward. And in order to do that, you need to know who you are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what your role is, what your contribution, So in a business, after an event, they do a SWOT analysis. Okay, what is it? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I don't like the word threats. I think it's more like obstacles or whatever, but then it would just be SWO. So they call it SWOT. Okay, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. If you don't know that, you're not going to be able to make anything happen. When Jacob gives the blessings to his sons, he's telling them basically their SWOT. Here's your strength, here's your weakness, here are threats to you, and here are your opportunities, and you need to function, and you will function best when you are in this formation, working with these other tribes, the ones who have, everybody has something different, but it needs to be organized, and not just organized, it needs to be, I've heard this was a great term, not just organized, it needs to be mobilized. You can be organized and not get anywhere, but if you mobilize, and you get mobilized by having a clear path laid out for you, so you know what you should do. This doesn't mean you can't be creative. This doesn't mean that there's no room for personality. It just means that all of that is within a framework so that it can be most effective. The instruction that Yaakov is giving his sons is, I want you to carry me as representation of this idea from Egypt to the land of Israel, standing in this way, because this is the pattern that is going to work, that will be for the future when you leave Egypt and you are in the desert, and the future when you're in the land of Israel, of how you will function as a nation to bring on earth as it is in heaven, and to make a matchup so that God's Kisei HaKavod, God's throne of glory, has a reality in this world. So that's why it says he instructed them, and they did exactly as he had instructed them and carried him in that way. You could say, why did they carry him at all? First of all, that's a really long trip. Why didn't they just put him on a wagon and say, okay, Dad, we'll follow you? They carried him. Okay, they carried him. This is the Mishkan in the desert is the same thing as Jacob's coffin. Because we tend to think of a coffin as like, oh, that's negative because he's dead, but we don't think of coffins that way. We say, no, this is the central focus. This represents a way of being in the world. And now Yaakov's coffin has turned into the Mishkan, which is the centralizing, organizing principle for the Jewish people. And the encampment is going to be the same as it was around. So when God says, don't worry, because Yaakov has already instructed the Jewish people. They have other issues. You know, we've got the golden calf issue, we've got some other issues, but we don't actually have that issue. And we never see during the entire 40 years, this is why I'm crying, we never see during the entire 40 years that anybody has any complaints about where they are. It's like they know. Now, whether they do it poorly or do it well as far as carrying out their mission, that's a different story. But everyone gets that they have a mission. They understand who they are. The only one who goes off the rails on this is Korach, okay? And Korach, that was an anomaly. That was one group of people. And even though it gets a whole parsha, and it's my bat mitzvah parsha, it's a whole parsha, but it stands out as an anomaly. Everybody else understood what it was that they were supposed to do and how they were supposed to do it. Patricia.
How do they explain the lapse of time, the 210 years, and how they remembered from one to the next?
It said it was inculcated, that it was so put in them.
Yeah.
It was absorbed. It's like part of our spiritual DNA. You can say like other things that are also part of our spiritual DNA. The ability for self-sacrifice, it says, was put in with Akedat Yitzchak. The ability, the binding of Isaac, the willingness to give our life. And hold on one second, I'm going to read you a story. I meant to bring it over. So hold on one moment. I'm just going to go grab this book that I found. Hang on. This is from a book by Rabbi Frand, Yisachar Frand. I'm on the parsha. And hold on a second, I want to read this to you. Okay, this is gonna be a little long, but I want to read you this story because it answers Patricia's question. I think a question we probably all have, that we don't realize what we have to tap into. Not what we have to tap, what we have that we can tap into, that we have when we're looking at the Torah and what it is recording for us. It's not just like, oh, this is our wisdom book. You know, this is not a wisdom book. This is a definition of our life. And if we understand it, we will understand our lives better. We will understand ourselves, who we are, what we're supposed to do and what we're supposed to be, and what we have the potential to do and be. So how do they remember? It says, because when something gets set in at the beginning, it's like, you know, people are finding out what children learn, like at the age of, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, sticks in them in a way that, it's like, good luck trying to get it out later. It's not so easy. It said, teach a child according to his way. When they're young, they will not vary from it. It says God is saying to Moshe, they have this. So where does a person get this? So here's a story. This is about the Holocaust and quiet heroism. So it says, many Holocaust memoirs devote an inordinate amount of attention to bread, because at the time, bread consumed all their thinking hours. To a concentration camp inmate, a piece of bread was life itself. Each inmate was given a piece of bread once a day, and he had to decide what to do with it. What should he do? Should he eat the bread right away, or should he perhaps nibble at it all day? Should he save it until he's tired and hungry at the end of the day so that he wouldn't have to go to sleep on an empty stomach? These were his questions. A Jew in a concentration camp was summoned to the commandant's office one day. This could only mean one thing: his time was up. Every Jew was aware that the moment of death could come at any time, and this Jew was no different. He sighed and said vidui, which is the confession, and making peace with Hashem. Then he exchanged his clothes with other inmates. He gave his shoes to a man whose feet were swaddled in rags. He gave his coat to one friend, and the precious piece of bread in his pocket, the piece of life he was saving all day. What was the point in wasting a good piece of bread when he had maybe minutes to live? He gave the bread to another friend and set out for the commandant's office. Wonder of wonders, the commandant needed something trivial and had no intention of killing him, at least at that particular moment. As the man walked back to his barracks, he felt certain he would get his clothing back. But what about the bread? The friend to whom he had given it could easily say he had already eaten it. In the barracks, the first person to greet him was that friend. "You're alive," he shouted ecstatically. "They didn't kill you. Here, take back your piece of bread. You must eat it. It's yours. Oh, thank heaven you're still among the living and not among the dead." Where does a Jew get the strength to behave like an angel when he has been treated like an animal? It dates back to Yaakov's funeral procession from Egypt to Canaan, when his sons learned to conduct themselves on the highest levels of humanity in the midst of terrible tragedy. Says, this has been put in us. Now, does every person rise to their whatever? Everyone can say, well, I know somebody and they did whatever. It's like, okay. But there was a Korach in the story also. But all the people who were angelic in such a time, I can't imagine. You see how Jewish people are even at a Kiddush, right? People act like they haven't eaten in 10 days. The way they like go after the cholent or the cookies or whatever. We're funny. But if somebody is starving to death and you're starving to death also, and to have the eyes and care for another person is absolutely incredible. Says that they learn to act like angels. And angels is the next level of what this encampment was about. Says, so we learned that Hashem has an encampment lamala and above, a heavenly encampment. And in his encampment, so there's a manifestation of the same kind of encampment. It says that the angels camp around God's Kisei HaKavod, God's throne of glory. And the way they do, they have leaders also. And you'll recognize the names of these because we refer to these angels in the bedtime Shema. If you look in a complete Siddur under the bedtime Shema, I do not know what page, you'll have to look it up in your own table of contents, but there is a reference to our personally being accompanied by angels. So who's at the front? It says in front of us is Uriel. Uriel is from the word or, it means the light of God. To the right is Michael, which means who is like God. That's God's chesed and strength. To the back of us is Raphael, from the word refuah, God's healing and protection. And Gavriel on the left, from the word gevura, of God's strength. It says, this is what's around the Kisei HaKavod. It says, when the Jewish people were able to see the angels encamped around at Mount Sinai, they saw the angels encamped around God's throne of glory. When they saw God, whatever that means, we don't even know what that means. And they were like, we want that. We want to be like that. And God is like, you are like that. That's who I want you to be. My angels in heaven, they can only do me so much good, honestly. What are they supposed to do? Clearly, it's my angels on earth that I need. I need you to be encamped also, says the Jewish people. And so we have to the east where we would have Uriel, the light. That is where the tribe of Yehuda leads the way. And then it goes just like how we shake our lulavs. We go for the east, and then we go to the south and west and north. And that order is the same order. The encampment goes the same direction. And it was to imitate the angels, but it wasn't just like, oh, we want to be like the angels too. It wasn't a costume. It was, we want to create that reality that we want to be the Malachim. The names again, yes, of course. In front is Uriel, from the word or, U-R-I-E-L, Uriel. To the right is Michael, the name Michael, means who is like God. To the back is Raphael, from the word refuah, means the healing of God. Okay, when you fall back, you need to be healed when you trip and fall. And to the left is Gavriel, like Gabriella, of Gevura, the strength of God. It says, and that was the encampment of the angels that the Jewish people saw. It was like, we want to be that. And the north, yes. So it goes east, east, south, west, and north. North is final. North is the final direction. Okay. Sorry, my phone is ringing. Let me just. Benjamin, I'm just not gonna get, okay. It'll stop in a second. Pretty, right? So those angels is that the Jewish people, that we are the Malachim. And how do we know? This is because remember, Jacob's face is on the Kisei HaKavod. Jacob's face is on that heavenly throne of glory, lest we think, oh, that's for angels, that's for spiritual beings, that has nothing to do with us. It's like it has everything to do with us. There's a fascinating, also another midrash that says that the world held its breath, that there was total silence and quiet when we stood at Mount Sinai. The world waiting to know if the Jewish people would accept the Torah. Because if we didn't, everything would be destroyed. There's no purpose to creation unless there is the Jewish people willing to carry the Kisei HaKavod, willing to carry and be the chariot for God's presence in this world. It's like the other people did not work out. Remember, Adam and Eve didn't work out so well. Noah didn't work out so well. Started over with Abraham, and when we had a critical mass of people in the land of Egypt, it's like, now we can go. Now we can become a people. So when this happens, is then we have it. And so there is in Tehillim, in Psalms, there is in Psalm number 8, verse 2, and this I can't give you a page because it's going to be different whenever you go. So Psalm 8, verse 2, there is a beautiful phrase here. It says, Ma adir shimcha b'chol haaretz. How powerful is your name, God, in all of the earth? In the earth, not in Shemayim. How powerful is your name, b'chol haaretz, in all of the earth and all of the land? It says, the word is ma adir. Adir is the word for powerful. It says, adir says that is an acronym for the encampment of the Jewish people. the encampment of the Jewish people. Now this, I'm going to share you with this. I'm going to share this with you, but it's not in order of the encampment. Okay, so it's the letters match up, but not the order. Adir is spelled Aleph, Dalid, Yud, Resh. It says, who is, it says the Aleph. Aleph is the tribe, the encampment under the banner of Ephraim. Ephraim was to the west, and you can see it, it's all laid out in the Chumash. Ephraim leads the west, that's the Aleph. The Dalet of Adir is the tribe of Dan. He was in charge of the north. The Yud is Yehuda, Judah. He was in charge of the tribes of the east. And Resh is Reuven. He was in charge of the tribes to the south. Ma'adir shimcha b'chol ha'aretz. Hashem is like, the angels are great, but what's even better? My name being carried by the encampment of the Jewish people. And carried by the variety of the people. You know, we have a constant challenge of what's better, you know, everybody individuality or homogeneity. It's like, we don't go with any one of those. We go with what's called shlemut. We go with what's wholeness, what is harmony that brings everything together, we're not a melting pot. The Jewish people are not meant to be a melting pot. As someone said, no, we're more like a cholent. You should be able to taste the barley. You should be able to taste the meat. You should be able to taste the potatoes. You should be able to taste the onions. And they make a magnificent mixture when they're all put together somehow. You'd be like, it's just stew. It's like, no, it's magical. It's a magical stew. And that is the stew of the Jewish people, but it must be made up of the individual talents, gifts, missions of each individual person that is differentiated, but is unified. And the unifying comes from the fact that they all carried Jacob's coffin. They didn't, you know, push one person out and someone said, well, I'm not carrying it because I'm gonna go do my own thing. It's like they all carried it. And you know that you can only carry something like that if everybody carries equal weight. You can't have, I've never been a pallbearer, but you have to have people who can all carry and shoulder the weight. Otherwise it tips over. So which is not a good thing. So in order to carry, everybody contributes what they have and everybody has equal value, even when they have different responsibilities and they have different gifts, they have different roles, and they have different things that they're supposed to do, but it's contributed to the purpose, the ultimate purpose, which is our goal is to carry God's reality, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, which is the Mishkan. That is our goal, is to carry it with us. So even when we say, before we go to sleep, about the angels in front of us, we're saying that we ourselves are a mini Mishkan. Because if we said that those angels are the ones that are around God's throne of glory, but then we're saying they're accompanying us, then by definition, guess who's in the center? Hashem's representation in this world, which is me, which is you. So it's at the individual level of each one of us, as well as at the communal level of the Jewish people. And that is what we are celebrating in the instruction that Hashem is giving to Moshe when he says, don't worry, they know how to do this. They have been inculcated, they have been educated. This is something that is known, we know this. So we see it in funny ways. We see it in Jewish geography. Okay, so I've told you I've gone to these exercise classes now. So first of all, the Jewish ladies are all kind of clumped together in one part of the class. I'm not saying we're not talking to other people, but there's just like this automatic affinity. Where are you from? Where'd your kids go to yeshiva? Where are they? Who's in Israel? Do you know this person, that person, my doctor, my niece, my nephew, all these things. And there's this instant connection and camaraderie. Now, we also have a challenge, which is the Jewish people have been challenged with an inclination to fragment and fight as well. It's like, unfortunately, some of our enemies have said, this is terrible that they said this. They've said, you don't need to fight Israel. They'll destroy themselves with their squabbling. And what can I say? I didn't want to say, well, how can you possibly say that? It's like, we have an inclination to that. And the reason we do is because the power of what would happen to the Jewish people and therefore to the entire world and all of creation, if and when the Jewish, I'll say when the Jewish people get themselves together, carrying the Torah, carrying God at the center, and each doing what we're supposed to do in that role, the world will be transformed. So when there is a koach, when there is a power for something amazing, profound, and earth-shattering, when that has the ability to happen, there will always, always, always be an equal and opposing force that goes the other direction. In fact, the equal opposing force, when we see the problem, it should remind us of what it could be. When we see like, oh, I can't believe the Jews are doing this, it's like, yes, isn't that amazing? They have an incredible power to just go berserk, and they have an incredible power to pull themselves together. It's amazing. We are an amazing people. God has blessed us, but a blessing has, in order to give us free choice, a blessing has to be accompanied by an equal challenge. That's why I say the greater the person, the greater the Yetzer Hara they have. So it's not that you escape. It's not like, oh, I'm so great, I don't have a Yetzer Hara. It's like, doesn't happen. The more the Yetzer, more great, the bigger the Yetzer Hara. The Jewish people has an incredible innate greatness, and we have an incredible Yetzer Hara that we are challenged by. So when this encampment, it's like, and thank God we had 40 years to practice this. So if it wasn't already inculcated by Yaakov, it certainly was at the end of the 40 years. And this is something that ripples out down to today. And we can see this in the way Jewish people are able to come together under certain circumstances, and hopefully more circumstances. And how do we do this? It says, when we need to know that the qualities that we have came to us, and that we can see them specifically in our Hebrew names, which is why it was also made a big production out of saying, if we go back to Bamidbar, again, to where your strings were, then it goes back to chapter 2 when it says, we'll see this again, the children of Israel shall encamp each man by his banner according to the insignia of their father's household, okay, of their family. Okay, that had to be by their families, like your family name, who you are. And just at the beginning of Bamidbar, it says, and let's turn back to that, and we see another reference specifically to their names. Page 727, which is chapter 1 of Bamidbar, and verse 2. Take a census of the entire assembly of the children of Israel according to their families, according to their father's household, by number of the names, every male according to their head count. Now, the reason it's males is because it was the people who go out to fight, and it represents, you know, the whole, because we're all connected. And then starting in verse 5, these are the names of the men who shall stand with you. So everybody, each of these people was counted by name. When you're counted by name, it's like, I mean, you could say, well, they just wanted to have it for government recording purposes. Like, I don't need to know your name. I just need to know like how many people are in the house. If I'm just doing numbers, so I just need numbers. So it's interesting that we had the book of Shemot, which is called Exodus, but Shemot really means names. And now we have these numbers, but we're really talking about names, the names of people. What is your name? So that when each of them is given their name of each of the tribes by their mothers, that they set into motion a mission, a task, a challenge, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And if I don't give you the whole picture, I've handicapped you. It says that was the gift that Yaakov gave to his children. It says we need to know what our strengths are. How could we be part of the Merkava? How could we be part of this chariot? How could we be part of the encampment if we don't know who we are and what we're supposed to be doing? Some people say, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. It's like, well, look at what your strengths are. If you have a strength. So Shira Smiles said this. And if you have ever learned with her, you will see why. But she is brilliant. She is an incredible scholar. And she can and does like teach Torah all day long. That is what she does. However, her daughter just recently got engaged, and in the Orthodox Jewish world, when there's a very short engagement period of time, there's a lot of exchanging of gifts between the bride and the groom to be, while they're engaged. It says they kind of have to make up for the fact that they're not going to have such a long time together before they get married, to have opportunities to give each other gifts, because when you give something to somebody, it engenders love. And when you give a gift, it makes you feel connected to them. There's also a whole thing about the bride's parents give a gift to the groom and the groom's parent gives a gift to the bride. We learned all this when Benjamin and Dahlia got married. We knew nothing. When Dahlia's mother's like, and so did you want to take Dahlia shopping for her candlesticks? I'm like, sure. And, and then they got Benjamin this, and that's like, how do you make somebody feel like they're your child? It's like you give them presents like you would your child. So anyway, they have these gifts, and they're supposed to be cute little things, like every, I don't know, once a week or every few days. And so people do clever things about what the person likes. And it could be little, it could be like, I don't know, like a water bottle with their name on it or something. Merkava means a chariot. The Mishkan is like a Merkava. Merkava is a chariot. Anything that carries that, and they carried the Mishkan. So they have all these little gifts. So Shira smiles because her daughter's engaged. She's like, oh, that's so interesting. Like, I should just open up, instead of like people running around, I should open up a store like that carries like cute little personalized gifts that the brides could give the grooms instead of people running around like crazy. And then she thought, no, I shouldn't. I'm a Torah teacher. It's a fabulous idea, but somebody who's like the creative artsy person who like can think of all these fun things, they should do that. That will not make the world a better place if I Share Smiles turn into running a souvenir shop instead of teaching Torah. Now, if she could manage both, she could do that. But it's like, one needs to know what one does. And this is not saying anything. She's like very in favor of somebody else doing it. We need to know what our strengths are and how our strengths can serve the Jewish people. When we figure that out, and by serving the Jewish people, we serve humanity also. It doesn't mean like that we have to limit it, but our first order is family. How can I serve the Jewish people? How do I serve God? How do I make God's presence real right here? So it's interesting, we've been going through many challenges with our construction project here. It's been really very upsetting and frustrating. And Steve and I are constantly aware of the fact that we are Jewish and that we're observant, and that what we do and what we say and how we say it is a reflection on all Jewish people. So that our frustration needs to be tempered with being polite and respectful. And how do you be insistent without being rude? And how do you do this? And how do you take into consideration other people and what other people are going through and what their challenges are? So all of this is like, that is called bringing the Merkava, of bringing the Shekhinah, the divine presence, into the world. This does not stay in the synagogue. This is what Jacob told his sons. You're going to carry me from Egypt to the land of Israel. God's not going to beam me up. We're not going to be transported on a magic carpet. It's not going to be anything magical. We're going to walk. It says, we walk in this world carrying the divine presence in our midst, surrounded, God willing, by the malachim, the angels who are accompanying us as they sit around God's throne itself. And that is a huge obligation and a huge responsibility. So Liz, if I can share this, I know you wrote me an amazing thing about having a Torah in your home. Amazing story. And having a Torah in your home makes your home super mishkan. I mean, a Jewish home is a mishkan anyway, but to have, a whole Torah, having a mezuzah already makes it holy. Having a whole entire Sefer Torah. Remember, we had the Torah in our home when we were sitting Shiva. And I remember Rabbi Friedman basically saying, you sure you're up for this? Having a Torah in your house is like, you gotta, up your game here if you're gonna have a Sefer Torah in your house. I'm like, that's so true. But I was like careful, like what I was wearing in the house. And like, there's a Torah here. We stand for the Torah. This doesn't mean that you can't sit down in your house, but it means like, this is very awesome to have a Torah. It says a person, that's called it, someone who is a Yirei Shamayim, someone who has awe of God, means to see. I see God's presence in my presence, in my present moment, in my home. I am aware of God's reality, and that is everywhere. It's not just, oh, I closed the door, so now I can like get rid of God, and now I'm just like on my own. It's like not happening. Okay, so it's like, but to have a Sefer Torah, to have that as an extra call to even higher levels of connection, which is a beautiful opportunity to have. So when we think about this this is what Hashem was telling Moshe, is don't worry. This is like what I had in mind all the time. Jacob has put this into the Jewish people. They will rise to the occasion. You do not need to worry. They are going to carry my presence, and they will encamp like this, because this is going to be fundamental to who they are, what their mission is in the world, and how they're going to carry through Jewish history. So when we read, you can join me in crying, you can join me in being emotional this Shabbos when we read the encampment, to say anybody who thinks that this was just like the Boy Scouts, how we're going to pitch our tent, is like, has missed completely the entire idea. When we add that in, and we'll conclude with this, even though it's a whole other topic, is this encampment, those 12 tribes are also correspond to the months of the year. And every tribe has a month that goes with it. And it's not like, okay, 12 of them, 12 of this, so that works out nicely. It was intentional. This is when the mothers, when Rachel and Leah knew that there would be 12 tribes, they knew there would be 12 tribes for each of the 12 months of the year, and that they were creating the encampment. It says they had Ruach HaKodesh. They had divine wisdom and inspiration to know. It wasn't just like, oh, Jews like big families. It was, no, we need 12, because the encampment on the ground is Hashem's encampment from heaven, is to be here, and it will be reflected in time as well through each of the months of the year and each of the qualities that go with each of the months. So we have that whole correspondence. There's also 12 permutations of God's name, of the Yud He and Vav He name, can be combined in 12 unique forms that are connected to 12 different verses in Tanakh. All of it is one whole system that we are talking about. So whether we're talking about in time, on the ground, in the spiritual realm, in ourselves, it's all the same pattern. So when we truly and more deeply appreciate and understand one, we will understand. I heard, but I don't know the names, and I haven't seen a diagram, that there are 12 gates, or there were at some point 12 gates to Jerusalem, one for each of the tribes. But once you got in, you were in Jerusalem. But each one, I'm not saying anything, I don't know if like, I'm not saying like each tribe went into its own gate. I don't know anything about that, just that there were 12 gates within the walls for each of the tribes, to indicate that there were like these 12, what that tells us is that there are 12 unique approaches to come in. They all have to be within the framework. It's not like anything goes, because anything does not go. There is a framework. But when there is that framework, there is the room for the individuality and the creativity and the unique aspects of every single human being that we are functioning with. So this is our encampment, and it was a wonderful time for the Jewish people. So we know it can be done. We know that we can rise to this level, and God willing, we will soon. And it says that there is also a midrash that says that in the future, the Jewish people are going to march with their lulavs and esrogs, and all of our enemies are going to flee. The mothers used to joke and say, yes, because the Jews will take those lulavs, which could kill you if I'm always nervous when the kids are playing with those lulavs like spears, they could kill you. I said, no, it will be the unity of the Jewish people waving the lulav and etrog in the 4 directions, actually 6 up and down as well, the encampment, that everyone will be doing that individually and as a collective, and there is no force that can withstand that, and they'll just go away. So we should just come to the place of having this encampment of the Jewish people sooner rather than later. Hashem should bring us Mashiach right now, and we should be able to reach this place. So I want to wish you a very wonderful Chag Yom Yerushalayim starting on Thursday night. Thank you. And I'll look forward to, excuse me, to seeing you next Wednesday. We will do something a pre-Shavuos. So I just have to tell you something funny. There's a wonderful rabbi in Boca named Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg. It's very worldwide known. And so Steve and I decided we were going to go to his class yesterday, which we thought was from 9:30 to 10. So we got to the Boca Raton Synagogue and we don't see any class. And then we see like about 3 or 4 people standing outside the sanctuary, like, and they're texting people and like, oh, it looks like the class that there was a change and he did it yesterday instead of today. I was so disappointed. So this one woman, she says, well, maybe you could give us a class. I've never known this, never saw this person in my life. So I thought that was really funny. Anyway, I was like, I wish, because I came to get inspiration from him. So I didn't have anything to say at that point. Otherwise, I honestly would have said, sure, let's go into the shul and let's talk about something. But I just thought it was really funny. So I didn't get to hear Rabbi Goldberg, but I did get to hear Shira's smiles and share that with you. And I hope you found that interesting and inspiring, as did I. All right, I can stay on for like a couple of minutes and then we're off to Target.
Oh,
Thank
sorry.
you, Ellen. Thank you, Ellen.
Can I ask a
Welcome.
question?
Are you
Yes,
also
Patricia.
having
Yes,
a place in Florida besides Israel? Is this construction or whatever in Israel that you're talking about that you're having problems with, or in Florida?
Oh,
Florida. Israel is going very smoothly, Baruch
Oh.
Hashem. We're
But
ready.
you'll also have a place in Florida to be near your daughter. Wonderful. Mazel tov. Enjoy it in good health.
Thank you, Marcia. Yes, Patricia.
So I need a clarification on the 12 tribes, because I
Yes.
know the Levites did not have a tribe, and then Ephraim and Manasseh both had a tribe, so they're the grandsons. So who was the 11th person of the 12 sons that didn't get a tribe? Do you see
Okay,
what
so
I'm saying?
they each have a tribe. It's
Yeah.
I have the encampment.
Well,
Joseph.
I thought there were 12 sons. Jacob had 12 sons,
He had 12 sons.
but then the Levites don't have a tribe.
They have a tribe. It's the
Oh, they
tribe of
do?
Levi. They have a tribe, but they don't have, they encamp right around the Mishkan. They're in the inner circle.
Okay,
They're in the inner circle by the 3 Levite families are in the inner circle. And then the tribes, the 12 tribes are on the sides. And the 12 tribes are minus Levi, because Levi's in the center. And instead of Joseph, it's Ephraim and Manasseh.
oh, okay.
So
That's
the
what I wanted to know.
Yes, good question.
Okay.
So you can
Thank
see,
you.
when you look in the encampment, you'll see that it has Ephraim and Manasseh. It won't be Joseph. Sometimes you'll see Joseph's square divided like on the diagonal, and they'll put Ephraim and Manasseh's symbols together. But in the encampment, they're in 2 separate places in the encampment.
Thank you.
That's why it's a trick question. If someone says, so what are the 12 tribes? It'd be like, well, what do you mean? Because there's different ways to count them. But the encampment is that, so Levi is not in because he's in the inner circle, and Joseph becomes Ephraim and Manasseh, so they're still 12. Gabi and then Andy.
Just to say that you're totally right. When Joseph said that was blaming the brothers to test them, he said, you are spying because you came from different gates. Remember, he said?
Oh, so actually that was into Egypt. You came from different
Oh,
gates.
right. We're talking about Jerusalem. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway,
That's
what's
okay.
fascinating, and thank you so much, Yasher Koach, big time.
Thank you.
Totally
Thank
fantastic.
you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Take care.
Andy, did you have a question?
I do. It's throne of glory. If you go back to that, you said there was an ox, a lion, an eagle, and a human face. And then there were 4. Were they all together with Uriel and Michael and Raphael and Gabriel? Were they all around the throne of glory?
The throne of glory, if you can picture a square box.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a Square, and on or a chair that has 4 legs, however you want to think about it. Each of the legs was the ox, eagle, lion, human
face.
face. So the chair itself was that, and then
Okay.
around it were the angels.
Okay, okay.
And
And
where-
just one more time, please, because I kept getting confused. Uriel was east?
Uriel is to the front, so which was considered east. East is always considered the front.
Michael
Is to the south.
south. Okay, I have it totally wrong.
It's to
Raphael?
Raphael is to the back, that's west.
Okay,
And Gabriel.
okay, Gabriel to
Gabriel is to the left, is north.
north. Okay,
Mhm.
thank you so
The
much.
same directions that you shake your lulav. So when you shake your lulav, you
Yeah, yeah.
shake and you start east,
Okay,
south,
yeah, yeah.
west, north, up, down. Yeah.
Thank you. This was
Unbelievable.
fabulous. You inculcated me with a ton of information.
Thank you. I loved learning it, and I was even happier to get to share it with all of you lovely ladies. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Found a target.
Liz.
Really bravo.
Oh, yes, we're gonna go buy a card table for the one that got ruined for our neighbor from the flood when we flooded her apartment.
That was sweet.
And then we're gonna get an ironing board so I can iron Steve's shirt, and we're gonna get a gift card for our grandson for his birthday, because he wanted a
No.
gift card. And then we're gonna take him shopping to spend the gift card as the activity. And we're buying a Monster Energy drink for the man who's doing the construction work, because I really
Non-
like, I said, we want to get you something. What's your favorite non-alcoholic drink? So he said, I like the Monster Energy drinks. I'm like, great. What flavor? He goes, green. I'm like, we're on it. So we're
Cool.
heading to Target to go get those.
Have fun. Thank you, Al.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Ox,
Thank you.
lion face, and what's the fourth? Sorry, ox, lion face, and
Ox, lion, eagle,
eagle.
and
Eagle.
human.
But I don't understand. Isn't the Merkava is the throne of glory, right? Oh no.
The Kisei HaKavod is the throne of glory. It
Exactly.
acts as a Merkava. A Merkava is a chariot that you bring to come down into this world. You travel with a Merkava.
So the Merkava is the chariot,
Correct.
and it's up in heaven, but it comes down to us in the middle of the formation where the Mishkan.
Anytime so think more abstractly, Gabi, more abstract. That the Merkava is anytime we carry God's presence into a place by how we act and what we do, we're called a Merkava. So Abraham was called a Merkava. It's a concept rather than something you should be trying to picture as a specific thing.
So we carry ourselves the Merkava when
We are the Merkava. And the Jewish people are a Merkava for Hashem's presence in this world. That's what we're saying, on earth as it is in heaven. It's like, it's great to have it be in heaven. If it doesn't materialize here, it's, I won't say insignificant, it's misses the whole point. All right, ladies, I do need to go.
I know. Bye, Rochelle.
Yeah.
All right,
Have a
bye-bye.
wonderful Shabbos. Take care. And
Thank
Liz,
you.
thank you for sharing your amazing story with me.
Oh, I'm so glad you read it. Now I'm worried about having the Torah. I was always worried about having the Torah in our house because I don't want to do anything wrong. But now I really need to know what I should or shouldn't do.
We'll talk.
Okay, let's do that.
It's a great opportunity.
Okay.
Please,
All right.
say hi.
Bye-bye, ladies.
Bye.
Take care.
In regards to Steve and the kids,
Thank you.
he's doing well, I hope.
Thank you.